Hi, everyone, and welcome. You know, when a doctor goes to restore blood flow in your legs, that's fantastic. But once they restore blood flow, is it actually going where it needs to go, which is actually just populating that tissue and restoring the oxygen and reviving those nerves? But you know what? Sometimes it just doesn't get there. What if doctors had a real-time monitoring system that allows them to know if all of their efforts to restore your flow was actually worth it? It was doing something. It would truly help your wound heal a lot faster by getting the blood to that wound. We have with us Corinne Louie. She is the co-founder and CEO of PEDRA Technology, a company out of Singapore that has developed such a technology. Corinne, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here, Kim.
I oversimplified.
Yes.
So, so let's talk perfusion. First of all, just describe, for those who aren't as familiar, talk about perfusion, why it's important, and then ultimately why your device is necessary for these physicians performing interventions to restore blood flow and heal those wounds.
And definitely, Kim. And actually, you said a lot of it right off the bat, which is that, having an intervention, with a balloon angioplasty to reopen the leg, the blockages in your leg vessels. You're opening up the blockages typically, in the larger blood vessels above the ankle, sometimes above the knee. When you do that, it's kind of like, hey, you've got the highway, right, with a traffic jam. You've maybe removed the congestion on the highway, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you've removed the congestion in the local roads, right? And that's what the problem that we face here in making sure that microvascular perfusion within the foot has actually improved as a result of removing the leg vessel blockages further upstream. So what we do at PEDRA with our new Zaron perfusion system that's used in the angio suite where these angioplasty procedures take place is that we, for the first time ever, can give physicians a quantitative look, an objective look into, when they are doing the balloon angioplasty, their stenting, etc., further up the leg, are they actually having an improvement in microvascular tissue perfusion in the foot, and particularly where the wound is located on the foot.
Now, they already check, afterwards, most doctors will check the pulses with the Doppler and they'll check the flow. Will they actually use this? Is this a nice to have or is this a must have?
First of all, laser Doppler is an old school technology that's been around for decades. And the disadvantage of laser Doppler is that the science behind it is such that you can only really try to measure perfusion at superficial skin levels. In most cases, less than 1 millimeter in depth, whereas PEDRA's technology is designed to go all the way down to about 8 millimeters in depth. And so there's a key critical difference, because when you go deeper into tissue, you're managing to pick up a heck of a lot more perfusion, measurement. And as a result, the measurement is a lot more accurate. The accuracy of laser Dopplers, even in the best, control environments during clinical studies, as far as I'm aware, is no more greater than, some 60% accuracy. So that's the reason why many physicians actually don't use laser Doppler either before or after an intervention. Now, the question of whether this is a must-have or nice to have, I would say that if you ask many physicians today, particularly those who are on the leading front of this of a treatment of PAD and CLI, a lot of them will tell you, Corinne, we needed this 10 years ago. And to me, that is absolutely true statement, devoid of any exaggeration, because it was about, I think it was about 10 to 12 years ago that myself and my partner in this company, that we heard about this need from no less than Dr. Craig Walker down in Louisiana. And so and it was fortuitous that we heard about this need, because when we came across this technology at the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, we knew that there was an application for it. And that's what led us to devote all these years of effort to building this technology into a product.
And so what was it? What was that convincing statement you made to the FDA that convinced them to grant emergency breakthrough status for your company and for Sauron?
Well, what we got, I think this was 22nd of January, was that we received from FDA a breakthrough device designation. And this basically is, if you want to call it that, it's a validation by FDA that this technology, there's a compelling need for it in this field. There really is, nothing on the market that sort of provides, this type of perfusion monitoring in the interest of the patient. And so we are very grateful for that designation. And what it does, FDA doesn't, do this in order to particularly promote any particular company, right? But they offer this pathway as is available to technology that they feel they want the Medicare patients to have access to as soon as possible. And so they are willing to, work with startups like us to try to expedite the regulatory approval process by working with us to help us, sort of design the clinical studies necessary to obtain FDA approval for it. And we think that this process is going to be very helpful to us.
Now, while you say it must be needed, and you had the validation just through the breakthrough designation from the FDA, but some would argue that, well, if this wasn't developed 10 years ago, there must be a really good reason that if they truly wanted this device, someone would have built it long ago. Now, on the flip side, there could have been a really good reason, like maybe the technology wasn't advanced enough to provide a device that was truly better, safer, faster, cheaper, and would provide these much better patient outcomes than what they have now.
And the true answer to that is that the technology has not existed until now. I mean, if you got the scientists and the optical specialists and the physicists to come and look into the science of this, they will tell you that we're skating right on the edge of what is possible, because when perfusion is such a small, delicate movement. I mean, these capillaries are so small that, basically the size where one blood cell squeezes through each microcapillary, right? And when the movement is so small and delicate, in essence, what we're doing is that we're measuring noise upon noise. And so the intricacy involved in that, the complexity of the optical science, there's something there. And we consider ourselves lucky that we were able to find a sweet spot through which this measurement could be detected. It has been attempted for many years, but it's only now that we've been able to do it.
So what truly was that catalyst that made it possible, made this technology actually possible and ready for market now?
I think that, it's not so much, I wouldn't say it as a catalyst, there wasn't in that sense, an aha moment. I think this really was a culmination of years of work, and these more recent years of work and research by our inventor and his team of postdocs. I mean, it took place on the shoulders of the giants who came before in optical science. And so science builds upon itself, and we've just been fortunate to be the last ones, the last layer, so to speak, and coming across, okay, this thing works now. So we're the lucky beneficiaries of that long development in science.
And I know form factor is really important. These cath labs are really small. So what are we talking about in terms of size and accessibility?
Oh, this was a big factor in our human factors design, before we even got into the more advanced prototype development. We went into the cath labs, the angio suites. We looked at the different configurations of bed, the angio screens, the monitors that hanging up above. We looked at the staffing in different, angio suites, whether it's be crowded, whether there be enough room. And finally, the design that we came up with is something that is small and portable enough. You could carry it with one hand, or you could mount it on the rolling cart platforms or the rolling pole platforms that you typically see in the angio suite environment. So the whole purpose of this, the design of the hardware and the single-use consumables, all of that was designed to fit into the AngioSuite workflow. And I'm glad to report that in studies both in the UK as well as now pending in some preliminary work that's being done here in the US, we are seeing that it fits very well. It is very, it seems very attractive to the clinical staff. There's a preliminary study going on right now in Pittsburgh where we send the devices over to them. And I think probably within a day of having unboxed the devices, they were playing the screens and they were telling us that, hey, we love this interface compared to a lot of other things on the market that, we've got to struggle to figure out what's going on the screen or the buttons. This one is just intuitive. And I want to take a little bit of credit on that because, it's not often that the company is led by a woman. And so it's like important for me that, hey, I want this to be as user-friendly as any of the other things that I do online, right? I don't want it to be complex for the sake of being complex.
Yeah. It's got to be quick and dirty. It's got to be easy to sterilize, by sticking one of those plastic bags right over it. And the buttons have to still be clear. The monitor still has to be clear through the encasing of the plastic. I mean, there's so much that goes into it. And I do agree that we certainly know how to dress an item, don't we?
Yeah. And the great thing about this is that, because it's a monitor that's a console that stands a little bit away, it might actually also, in most situations, be outside the sterile field. So, or you might not even need to cover it with a drape. All you need to do is, I guess all the staff members in the AngioSuite would have a glove on their hands. And so they'd be able to tap on the touch screen itself right there, with their gloves on.
Do you always see this as being an independent device, or do you see this as being something that could be coupled with other technologies, such as maybe with a Doppler? Maybe it's an all-inclusive device.
I think that if that happens, it would be further downstream. I don't think it's going to happen in the first, say, 3 years of commercialization, simply because a startup doesn't have that much resources to be, coupling devices, technology together like that. If ultimately at the end of the day, the commercialization takes place the uptake of this is greater than what we expect it to be, and as the revenues come in, we might have additional budget to be able to do this. But as of now, I don't hear the voices from the physicians saying you must couple it to something else.
Right, I imagine that
you with it alone.
And you mentioned it does take a lot of money for these studies. You can't underestimate that. So I imagine you're in the middle of a race. B round.
It's a B round, and we needed to do a number of things. As you can imagine, there's regulatory issues, there's reimbursement issues, there's clinical trial program, and there's, ultimately, if we are going to reach the market, there's a whole slew of other commercialization, manufacturing, production issues, including the buildup of inventory, because you've got to be able to, have your devices in hand once the physicians start, demanding them.
Are you looking at, do you have a set target market initially? Are you looking at office-based labs? Are you looking at universities? Are you looking at general hospitals and facilities?
I think that these procedures take place, in the hospitals as well as in the OBLs. So for us, it's very natural that we target both. We can't just serve one market in preference to
all of the above.
Pretty much.
So with all of this money that you're raising, where are these studies taking place, if any, now? And what are we looking at in terms of getting things started and underway very soon?
Well, there's a very small study that's in Pittsburgh, ongoing in Pittsburgh right now. And then there's going to be another set of studies in the AngioSuite that's being planned. And that will take place across at least 3 sites and up to a maximum of 6 sites in the United States. But these are the smaller studies. Following that, and for which we're raising our next Series B round of financing, would be a multi-center study. The design of that study hasn't quite been nailed down yet, but that I think is widely viewed internally that this would be the pivotal study that will establish, the indication for use, particularly for CLI for monitoring of the procedure during for treatment of CLI.
Do you have your eye on the types of sites that you're already looking at that you think would serve you best? Are you looking at, for example, in some of the most vulnerable populations, maybe one in the South, maybe one in a more Hispanic community in California,
Yes.
one at a large hospital, big city, variety?
Yes, we are definitely. We're very much aware that diabetes is a huge, factor in critical limb ischemia. As you probably know already, that a patient who has a foot ulcer who's also diabetic, the prognosis for that patient is, far more severe than for somebody who's not diabetic. And also for diabetics, and I don't know if you know this, but there has been research where they've analyzed thousands of leg vessels in diabetic patients, and most of the diabetic patients have a disease that's diffuse below the knee. Many of them have very long lesions, long blockages, and I think something like half of those long blockages are, more than 10 cm long. So it's a very complicated disease, present in diabetic individuals, and that is why I think there's a strong view that especially for this subset of patients, perfusion monitoring during the intervention is even more important.
What are some of the limitations of the device? You said it's just getting, that next gen, that final gen that you're going to put out there. It's really right now. What are some of its limitations that you kind of had to stop and say, we need this MVP, we need to get this out there. It's fine for now. It's safe. It does what we need to do. What is it that it does what we need to do now, but ultimately with your vision, I can tell you're the type of person that's already 10 steps down the road and says, I want this capability for it as well?
Well, here's the thing. The MVP was a while ago, and it was the MVP that went into the UK study, which took place, I think, about 18 months ago, and which started about 18 months ago. And that MVP was something that we were kind of holding our breath on because, we didn't have funding to go beyond a basic prototype, and we needed clinical data before we could get new funding. So it was to just, basically break that chicken and egg vicious cycle. We put a very basic prototype through a blinded observational study in the UK with great results, I have to say. So we're grateful that we did that.
Well, I want to hear those results.
Well, they established safety. So that was a big win for us. And then, but to get from that basic prototype to where we are today, that took additional funding. But we're quite happy with what we have right now. The only difference between what we have right now and what will eventually reach the market is that we just need to basically transfer, the design to a manufacturing facility that can manufacture in greater volume. And so we're right in the midst of that process, and seems to be going well so far.
So the functionality is, it's there, it's what you want, it's what you ultimately will want, and
Yeah.
at least at this point, there's no plans for, new iterations anytime soon, that this is the holy grail.
This is basically it. I mean, and we have nailed down the user interface. Some people will call it the software, but it's what you see when you turn on the console, the monitor. And that user interface has been vetted by hundreds of physicians. I think it's 150 physicians, as well as Angio Suite staff, nurses, and radiographers, techs, etc. So, and it basically gave an almost universal thumbs up that this was a simple, easy to use interface. And so we're probably not going to change that beyond tweaking just very minor details.
You mentioned there has been studies, in particular in the UK, for safety, and proved it was safe. When did you scrub up and throw on that lead and go into the and see this device in action? Were you at the forefront helping the doctors and training them and making sure it was done right? Or were you in a procedure that truly reaffirmed what you were doing and just warmed your heart that you saw your device making a difference? Can you bring us back to that moment?
Well, I wasn't scrubbed up for the UK study because they wouldn't allow me in there, but I have been scrubbed up and in the gown and everything in other, case studies. And I won't, there was one case study, and I can't remember exactly the circumstances, but I do remember very clearly that after the end of the procedure, the doctor felt, based on the angiographic images, that he had done a great job. The vessels were wide open, and he turned to our tech who was managing the device back then, the very old basic prototype, and he asked her, so at the end of I think I'm done. I think I did a good job. What does the perfusion monitor say? And she looked at it and she said, because the perfusion level was level, right? It didn't change much. And she said, no, actually, nothing happened. And he said, no, that can't be right. So what he did was that he did another contrast shot. And for the few seconds that the image appeared, angiographic image appeared, he realized that the vessel had closed back down again. It was elastic recoil. And so for that patient, that was his lucky day that PEDRA's device the technology was there, because that caused the physician to be able to then go back in and reopen that lesion again before he finally called an end to the intervention. So that's just one example of the many ways that perfusion monitoring could actually have an impact.
I think literally you just painted the picture right there. Recently, I was in a case scrubbed up in lead in the cath lab, and they had a long calcified occlusion, CFA, SFA, and they pumped the contrast fluid in, did the bolus chase runoff, looked beautiful. It was amazing. Yes. They closed him up, got him, back. He was prone. They had to flip him back over. He was all set, ready to take him out. And then suddenly his foot just completely lost all circulation. They were like, oh my gosh, what's going on? They had to do the Doppler. There was no pulse, nothing. They had to go back in and reopen and then stent, because lo and behold, when they pumped the contrast fluid in, yes, it had quickly recoiled. And so that happens a lot. And that happens, I guess, especially since it was a long calcified occlusion, it can happen more often than not.
Yeah.
But we see that a lot actually in below the knee vessels, the fragile vessels. And I also see this it being really important for that critical pedal loop. Only 10% of US doctors are able to revascularize the pedal loop. Many say it's just too risky. The risks outweigh the benefits, et cetera, et cetera. But having something like this, I think that could really help with the
I fully agree. And, there's no point in restoring blood flow up to the ankle, down to the ankle, and then, not caring about what happens below the ankle, right? That doesn't make sense to me.
No. Well, thank you so much. Corinne Louie, she is the co-founder and CEO of PEDRA Technology. Before we go, though, I have to ask, where did you come up with, I want you to tell us the story for both names, Sauron, which is the name of your technology that is used for monitoring, perfusion monitoring, and also PEDRA.
Well, the name PEDRA came from our co-founder, who's a vascular surgeon here in Singapore. His name is Sriram Narayanan. And I said, hey, Sri, why don't you come up with a name for the company? And so he did. PEDRA means pedal revascularization assessment. So, that was his baby, his name. And the name Sauron, well, that's came from yours truly, because I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, right? So, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, you know that there's this evil eye, Sauron, that looks over everything and sees everything. Well, we spelled it differently, obviously. It's X instead of an S. So it's a Sauron. And the X, we're acting for the good, not for evil. We see all the good stuff in the angio suite, and we report it to the physician so that they can do a better job.
Thank you so much. Lots to go before we see Sauron come to market. Still a study ahead. They have a raise to do, and then we'll see with the go-to-market strategy if, in fact, this is going to be a technology that is going to be used globally. Thank you again, Corinne Louie. She is the co-founder and CEO of PEDRA Technology.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's been a pleasure.